Welcome to the Workplace Ninja Netherlands podcast, a series on Microsoft's modern workplace management.
Hi, welcome again. There are we with the new Workplace Ninjas Workplace Series podcast. Second recording together with my buddies Joost, Kenneth and Peter again. They are introducing themselves in the previous one. So if you want to know who they are, please listen to the previous one.
That's a smart one, Frans. So please listen to the previous one if you want to know more about us. Yeah,
it's and probably we have also other recordings with Ronnie de Jong with other ones. So if you want to learn from us, subscribe and see what you can do with the notification button and that sort of thing. So it's good to see that on YouTube. Subscribe and
thumbs up
and thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Subscribe, indeed.
But also on the podcast platforms where you are, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, you can make some noise around that. So that's good to do. We are doing a new recording today about, Joost?
We're going to do it about Autopilot.
What's that? We will ask that Kenneth in a few seconds. Autopilot it's about auto-enrollment. But first, do we have other enrollments as well in the environment, Peter?
In which environment?
In Intune.
In Intune. Now, basically, every platform has basically their own automatic enrollment environment. Like the Apple Business Manager, you can use automatic enrollment from Apple to automatically enroll iOS devices, macOS devices.
It's also for macOS, so not only for iOS, also for Mac.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. For Android, you have Google
Enterprise,
yeah, and they have their Google, of what is it?
Android Enterprise is actually the
but the automatic enrollment, the Google, it has a special name.
Google tends to change that once in a while. So
it's almost Microsoft, so we are changing names every month
exactly.
or so.
Yeah.
Do we have also auto-enrollment for Linux?
No. Not to my knowledge, and maybe in the Linux world, but
I don't know. But
nothing related to Microsoft.
Endpoint Manager, Intune, or stuff.
Exactly.
And then we have Windows. Kenneth, Windows Auto Enrollment. That is Autopilot.
That is Autopilot. So
what is it, and why do we need that?
Well, basically, the idea of Autopilot is to take a machine from the shelf. The machine, of course, has to meet some prerequisites, but more on that later. And actually transform that machine into a machine which is actually fit to the organization in where it resides. And we actually accomplish that by making sure each machine has a unique ID, and we actually couple that unique ID of that machine in your Microsoft 365 tenant, making a direct relation between the hardware and that device.
So, and a direct question on that. That device can still be once in a tenant.
Yeah, there's a one-to-one relationship.
Yeah, check.
But again, for example, one of the prerequisites is, of course, that you need to run like a Windows 10 Pro license in order to make that happen. Operating systems like Windows Home don't have any knowledge about what Autopilot is. On the other hand, if you have like a Windows 10 Pro system, which you get from the manufacturer, and actually the Autopilot unique hash has been configured in your environment, you can only install that machine within that environment and not within another environment anymore.
And also not locally. So if it's connected to the internet the first time, it will directly connect to.
Well. Technically, of course, it's possible, but not in the normal flow of installation. So you have to know your way around to make that happen.
Peter?
Yeah, you need to be network connected. If the device is offline, you can
do that.
You can do it.
Yeah.
So
okay.
if you're internet connected, then you will be directed to the tenant for which is configured. So
And what you're describing, Kenneth, related to the one-on-one connection with the hardware ID, that's in my opinion, it's more or less the same with Google and Apple as well.
yeah, exactly.
Indeed. Yeah.
Why should we use Autopilot? What do we benefit from it?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. But the idea is, of course, that we are able to provision a machine with a company-specific configuration. And again, that can be handy. For example, if we go towards the promise of Autopilot, where we, as a company, you actually order your hardware, get it delivered at the user's location, and that the user itself, so that the person sitting behind it and working on it, can do the whole enrollment process. And if you have that working, you're doing the true Autopilot implementation. But what we see in practical that sometimes IT is still involved, or we want to do Autopilot but not totally, etc. And that's where things go wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah, and probably we have some options within Autopilot for IT environments to help on that, but I probably will come back to that later. Autopilot, Joost. What, as Kenan say, why? What's your opinion on that?
We're going to make it easy for the user itself, because when it's going to be onboarded, the first steps, but we're going to be doing that later. The only thing he has to do or she has to do is fill in the email address, password, and the IT is going to do it for them, and it's going to be enrolled. It's going to be a corporate device, so we can do something with it. Everything is being configured like we want to do it. That's the basic steps of Autopilot. And why?
What do we need to do in order to use it? Are there some basic steps up front? Do I need to configure some DNS records, or what are the requirements to use Autopilot?
First, you have to configure your Intune environment. That's the first step, I think.
Yeah. What do you mean with configure your Intune environment? Is that do I need to configure all sort of config policies, compliance policies, and so on, or can I stick with only some Autopilot profiles?
First step is checking your automatic enrollment settings. If there is something in there what can be used to enroll it automatically. Basically, it's set to all. But if someone else has already been doing some stuff there, you have to check it. That's the first step we want to approach. And second step will be creating a deployment profile, telling the device is going to have a standard user or an administrative user, preferably standard user, please. And then we can create an enrollment status page. And in the enrollment status page, there are a lot of settings, but that would be for a next step. And then we have to onboard some devices, and that can be done several ways.
Do we forget one step? Company branding?
Company branding.
Could be nice, yeah.
Yeah, in my opinion, company branding is necessary in order to activate the enrollment status page.
It's not necessary, but it's good for the user to see you're enrolling a device to the company you know it's your company to enroll it to.
Yeah. But what Frans is referring to, there used to be a point in time that actually the configuration of the branding was actually necessary to make it work.
It isn't anymore?
No, it works also without.
Okay. Yeah, probably. I know it from the past.
It has been a hard requirement.
Yeah, it was, yeah. And maybe it still is, if you look at the documentation, but I've seen it working without.
Yeah, okay. Then we have the enrollment status page. We have a deployment profile. It's connected probably, but first we have to import devices.
We have to get the device known into the Intune environment, and that's called a hardware hash.
And that hardware hash that can be imported in a few different ways, I guess.
Yep.
So if I have done it in the last few days, so I know it at the moment. If I have a current running environment or a virtual machine or something, there is a PowerShell script that can be used for that. I think it's on the learn.microsoft.com website, so you can use that, and then you have a CSV file that can be imported. There's one, so manually.
That's the get Windows Autopilot info script. For people who've done that before, you probably know that. So that's a way to do it. You need to harvest it, of course. So you need some kind of way to run a PowerShell session on the machine, which is not in every stage of the machine possible, of course. But it allows you to actually create the unique ID and put it in a CSV file, which you can actually then import into your devices in Microsoft Intune.
But if you start testing and you have a device which is in the out-of-the-box experience, press Shift F10, start Autopilot, PowerShell, sorry.
Yeah.
And start the get minus Windows Autopilot info, and then minus online will add also an authentication towards your tenant, and it will import the device hash directly.
Yeah, that's also
so you don't need to export it to a CSV. So if you want to get started really quick, then you can do that also from the out-of-the-box experience. But in a large enterprise, you can use a PowerShell script, but you can also use Config Manager to harvest those information.
Yeah, and there are two things on top of that. So when I order a device, there is also a possibility, I guess.
Yeah, so you can ask the manufacturer to do the harvesting for you, because they know, of course, which devices they deliver. And you can even give them the option to actually directly do that into your environment. So the hashes will be automatically uploaded at the point that you actually order those devices from the manufacturer at that point.
Yeah, and then that manufacturer can have also the integrations from partner admin link, for example. No, it's not partner admin link.
No, that's another option that's available as well. That Microsoft partners have other ways to import Autopilot hashes as well, just by using things like serial number, or they don't have to harvest those devices. But again, that's only limited to Microsoft partners, so you have to have a partner relationship with the tenants.
Yeah, and that can be done within the partner environment. If you have a CSP partner, for example, they can add that in your environment.
Yeah, so if you have like an inventory where you know the serial of the devices, you can use that to do the Autopilot device import.
I'm looking currently at the enrollment profile. One of the basic questions in there, and I can answer that way, yes or no, in the policy, is convert all targeted devices to Autopilot. What does that, Joost?
All your devices, it's already saying the thing, but all your devices targeted are going to be created as an Autopilot device.
Yeah, but is that because if I have a new device, I can target them?
No.
So I need to import them.
Existing environment.
Is that are for the existing devices that already enrolled within Intune?
Yeah, if they are part of Azure AD. So you're targeting an Azure AD group with devices.
And then they will automatically be converted towards an Autopilot device, meaning that if you would, for example, do a reset of that device, which you actually enrolled using another method than Autopilot, you could create a situation where after that reset, the Autopilot process is kicked off automatically.
So if you have an environment, an Intune environment, where you have lots of devices, they can be automatically turned into Autopilot devices.
Indeed, yeah. So it's actually an automatic way to upload the Autopilot hash for you, because you already have that management channel available to you.
Is this something you'd like to use?
In existing environments could be the option. We see, for example, environments now where we do mass enrollment, we don't use Autopilot for the mass enrollment phase of the project, but we want to have the option to, for example, reset the device and use Autopilot in case something goes wrong. Yeah, then of course we have those devices identified as Autopilot in that case. So options are always good because it helps you to build different kind of scenarios in that case.
Yeah. Joost, we have the devices in Intune. We have created that with an import script or from our manufacturer or a CSP partner, for example. What then?
So the devices are already in there. The next step I always do is check if the enrollment status page. So that's the first step the user is going to see. How you want to onboard? Are you going to see some kind of steps in the settings, like the acknowledgement of the agreement of Microsoft, keyboard settings, language settings? Do you want to set some language settings already to the device? That's the next step.
Yeah, and there are settings in the enrollment status page.
Yeah,
There where you're referring to. Yeah.
correctly.
So you have to set up the enrollment status page with keyboard settings, out-of-the-box experience, and that sort of things. What the user has to choose what we normally do if we set up a Windows device. That can be suppressed with the enrollment status page or configured that way.
Correct.
So the whole idea of the enrollment status page is that you, of course, configure the steps which you would normally configure during the out-of-the-box experience. So you can turn off certain questions during the out-of-the-box experience. One of the other things is, of course, you can determine whether the user gets the local admin rights or the normal user rights. We can determine machine naming. We can determine which application must be installed for the ASP to successfully finish. So there are a lot of settings in there which can be helpful.
And they can be targeted to different group of users, a group of devices. So we can create multiple enrollment status pages with different settings.
We potentially can do that. You were talking about the kiosk scenario that installation could potentially have a different enrollment status page configuration. Of course, in combination with your Autopilot profile, where we of course determine what happens with that machine and maybe give it another naming convention. But again, it's the combination of the Autopilot deployment profile in combination with the enrollment status page, and that brings the total experience of doing an Autopilot enrollment.
Yeah, and if I set up my my device, it's my device hardware ID is covered in Intune. I turn on my device. I have an internet connection. How does my device know who to point, where to point to the right tenant, for example? Is that?
That's information which is stored in the Autopilot service.
Yeah, but
based on the hardware information, the hardware hash, it's bound to.
So each OS reaches out to Microsoft.
Yeah, but is there a specific DNS record CNAME necessary for?
Not for that Autopilot thing. In order to do the enrollment into Intune, of course you need to have the DNS records in place. But actually that lookup to Microsoft, whether am I an Autopilot device, yes or no, works always.
Yeah, and the other way around, the things that I want to mention out, the CNAME validation that is in the Windows enrollment part, that is regarding the Azure AD join and the MDM enrollment.
Yeah.
So we need enterprise registration, enterprise enrollment domain name.com.
Indeed. Yep. And what I always do is I redirect the DNS to my Microsoft 365 environment, and I have those records available, always up to date. But I can imagine that in some environments you want to host your own DNS, of course. But then you need to make sure that you have the correct records in place. Yeah.
Okay, there's a way to point all your records to Microsoft 365, and then you have to do nothing anymore.
Yeah, you just make Microsoft the authoritative for your DNS environment. So it's the authoritative name server. And then as a bonus, you all actually get the correct DNS records which you need in order to have your environment up and running.
And if you want to create extra records, then you can do that in the Microsoft environment as well.
You can redirect back to your web server for your web site, for example. But I find it quite handy, especially for smaller customers, to have that centralized in the Microsoft 365 environment as well, because there we have all the settings together.
We need to create a jingle for that. Pro tip from Kenneth.
Yeah. And can keep it pragmatic. On the other hand, if you want to do it in your own DNS, be my guest. But I like simplicity, and this is my simplicity tip for today.
Yeah, great. We have the devices, we have the enrollment status page, the automatic enrollment, and then
turn on your device.
Yeah, but there needs to be a deployment profile. What options do we have in the deployment profile?
The simplest thing is you have to set your user, if it's going to be an administrator or a standard user. That's the main thing over there. And you got some other ones, but I can see you have it on your screen as well. And I'm a little bit lost here, but maybe you can help.
Yeah, we have, which two deployment modes do we have, and what are the difference, the user-driven and the self-deploying mode?
You got user-driven. That's saying enough. I think you have to, the user can drive itself into the environment, and self-deploying is the device is going to be self-deployed into the Intune environment, and in the backend is going to use a device enrollment.
Yeah, for which type of devices shall we use the self-deploying mode? For example, we talked already about kiosk devices. Are there any other?
Shared.
All shared devices.
Shared devices, yeah. So you can set it up. You can walk over there, put it on. It's going to be self-deployed into the environment. It's already set up, and the user can log on. Yeah,
it's not directly connected to one user, but it's shared. There's many users can use.
So basically, it doesn't need any user interaction to finish the process.
Yeah.
So, for example, a kiosk device, you can actually deploy it to a working situation starting from nothing. For example, if you reset a kiosk device and to do the redeployment, if that device has network connection, you can do it without any user interaction. Fully, while for the user enrollment, a user always needs to log in. Also we have different steps there, of course. But that's actually the main difference between those two types of enrollment profiles.
Self-deploying is in preview, public preview at the moment. So
for a long time already.
They're already for years.
Yeah. Will that at any time? Will that be out of preview? Or what are the reasons that it's still in preview? Do we know that?
No idea. No. I use it in production because it has been in preview for so long.
But preview features are also fully supported. So the only thing is that they can change. So if you
they can change.
build your processes on preview features, your processes may break until it's GA, but it's fully supported.
Yeah, that's changed. I think about 2 years ago, Microsoft changed their statement about preview. So everything in Intune, when it's in preview, you can use it in production environments, and it's fully supported. But like you said, it can be changed.
Yeah, so obviously what you see is that Microsoft reserves that they can actually change the product while it's still in preview. Yeah. So some functionality can change, but that's the whole reason why they are previewing it, to learn and see what can be improved in order to make it better.
Yeah, what do they need to improve to make it better for us?
Maybe we can expect some improvements in the self-deploying profile because it's still in preview.
Yeah. There are a lot of options in the deployment profile, like join to Azure AD. We have two options. Azure AD joint or hybrid?
No, we have one option only, which is Azure AD joint, and hybrid shouldn't exist.
We had a discussion in a few weeks ago, Joost. Hybrid Azure AD joint. There was a statement from us. Why? What were we talking about at that time.
Why should you use hybrid? And I don't see it anymore. It's not necessary for any stuff laying around in your older environments, your legacy environments. So don't do hybrid anymore. We've got a lot of other stuff to get those things working. But why we used hybrid before?
So next pro tip, only Azure AD join.
Well, make that your first start. And of course, there's a reason to do hybrid. And there are maybe still some use cases why, but those use cases become less and less. To give you an example, I had a customer 2 years ago, which was still using a VPN solution called Direct Access. You're probably familiar with that. And direct access could only be enabled if your devices had GPOs attached to them. Therefore, there was a real necessity to have it hybrid joined. But in my experience, we did manage to make it work, but it was complex and it was not the situation that we wanted. And it's really hard to get rid of the hybrid join, because it's not like you can set an option and make them Azure AD joins. You have to reinstall the devices to make that work. Of course, if you have Autopilot, it's only a push of the button, but you probably know that it's not in practical. It's not that easy as I'm telling it now.
I'm laughing, and because I push on the button, that was the marketing term that was used from the Microsoft side regarding Autopilot when they introduced it.
Indeed.
Yeah, that was the best marketing strategy ever.
Yeah, and the marketing strategy around Autopilot, we talked about a few minutes before recording this one. The marketing strategy was good on that, because
Definitely.
every customer is talking about Autopilot. I need that. And then if we're going into a conversation with a customer, they are probably changes the thinking that about Autopilot.
Every CEO that came back from that Ignite, where Brad Anderson was presenting this during the keynote, said, "Well, we want to get rid of OSD. We want to get Autopilot today." And for our listeners, Autopilot is not a replacement for OSD, so it's helping us.
Now, Autopilot is a complete other way around of enrolling devices.
Exactly.
OSD, where you have an image, where you can have applications in that image and all other configuration as well.
Yeah, well, it's actually good that you manage that, because looking from a practical side of what we see happening with Autopilot is that the company wants to transition towards modern management. They have a hard time ordering just the right hardware at the manufacturer, meaning that the device is updated to the latest OS, that the firmware is updated, that maybe you have a password to access your BIOS or UEFI settings, so to make the device secure. Or they want to repurpose existing machines into the Autopilot service as well. And that combination can actually fastly lead to a requirement where you need to do you need to do OS deployment to put the machine in a state where you can do Autopilot. And if you are doing that, you should really ask yourself what the added value of Autopilot is.
Yeah.
And that's something that many companies I have a hard time convincing customers that OSD still serves a purpose.
Exactly.
Because we can install drivers, not something that can be done with Autopilot yet. Don't get me wrong, Autopilot evolves as well. But there are many use cases to keep using the traditional OS deployment solution. If you have SSM, you already have it, but MDT is still around to do so. There are many good initiatives to keep that updated as well. So that we have options there, and you should actually use the right option for the right scenario in that case.
When looking back at the deployment profiles, we have user-driven and self-deploying. When using self-deploying, almost everything is grayed out, because self-deploying is only Azure AD. There is no choice. You have no choice about the account options, the privacy settings, and all that sort of things. The only thing that you can configure is the keyboard and the region. So you have set up that machine in the correct region.
Yeah, and the machine naming, of course, in the profile.
Yeah, there is a naming template that you can use to set up that.
So it's really self-deploying.
Yeah, I hope so. I will return back to my desk when we have recorded this, and
We
hopefully
can almost call it an unattended installation. Yeah,
it's unattended.
Zero touch.
indeed. Yeah.
Zero
So,
touch. Yeah.
And almost zero touch. If you have a LAN cable connected and he has internet, then it's zero touch. But if you rely on Wi-Fi connection, for example, that's the only thing that you have to do. So you can set up the keyboard, the region. Then you have to do it by yourself. Then you connect to Wi-Fi connection, and then it will do the steps from that.
For this scenario, you need to have that TPM2 chip, right? Still.
yeah, you need to be able to do what they call TPM attestation. That's
the device health
yeah,
attestation.
and that's actually necessary in order to make this work.
Yeah, that is that's specific for the self-deploying.
Yeah,
mode.
exactly. For
Self-deploying
this,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe we should invite Rudy Ooms once to tell us about how that works under the hood with all the certificate stuff going on. But I think he can talk about for more than an hour on that subject. Yeah.
Probably we can extend our recordings with one of them.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and but self-deploying requirements for TPM 2.0 and enhanced what is it? Device health attestation that is needed, and
Well, it's actually called, we have the device health attestation. That's actually measuring the device health during the boot, where the BitLock is enabled, etc. But we also have the TPM attestation, which is a specific function within the TPM, making it possible to do the self-deploying enrollment in that case. On the other hand, today with Windows 11, every machine which is certified with a Windows license, Windows Pro license, of course has that functionality available, because if it doesn't get certified to have Windows Pro installed.
yeah, then we have the devices, the hardware hashes in the tenant. We have created the enrollment status page. We have done something with DNS, so that's working, so it can be enrolled in Intune or in Azure AD. We have the device enrollment profile. Are we good to go, Joost?
I think so. Yeah. What we can do is set some policies, but that's not necessary for Autopilot itself. So
Not for Autopilot itself, but it's necessary afterwards if you want to configure something.
Yeah.
So probably we can talk about that in the next one.
yeah.
Any other things to mention? We have some requirements specific for self-deploying. Are there other things to keep in mind when looking at Autopilot?
Well, I think it's good to mention for the complete picture that if we want to use Autopilot only to do the enrollment, that we need to configure the enrollment restrictions and make sure that we can only install Autopilot devices or corporate-owned devices, meaning that we need to block the installation of personal devices.
Yeah.
And that is one of the biggest things I see going wrong at customers, because if you don't disable that, any user with an Azure AD account can Azure AD join the device, and actually it will be automatically enrolled within Intune. And before you know it, you are actually managing private devices, or maybe bring your own devices, as you may call it. But I don't, that's causing a lot of issues.
Yeah, and probably if you have set up that option to convert that devices automatically in Autopilot devices, then is your private device is instead
Indeed,
a corporate device.
Yeah. So that, and again, that option is open by default. But really, start thinking about, we want to do Autopilot only. That means that the hash needs to be imported, and make sure that only that scenario works, and not the enrollment of any other personal device into your environment. Because there are a lot of PowerShell frameworks out there which actually do the same, creating a device object with a trust thing, and from a security perspective, then they own your environment, to say so.
Yeah, so but maybe good to mention also, if you, for some reason, have a different MDM solution, like AirWatch or Mobile Iron or
What's that?
whatever, you can also use Autopilot. Autopilot is not some service which is completely fixed to Microsoft product.
It's not stick to Microsoft Intune.
No, exactly.
One last question. If I used Config Manager in co-managed situation or whatever, can I use Autopilot in that way also?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem.
So there's no need to stick in OS deployment if I have a specific scenario.
I think what Kenneth just said are really good options or requirements to have OSD still in place for your initial deployment, setting up the BIOS, securing it, making sure that your everything is up to date, and then just enable Autopilot for their self-service. If the device is malfunctioning, they can reset the device themselves at home without needing to go to the office, without needing to redeploy the device via OSD. So yeah, definitely it can go hand in hand.
Yeah, nice. Did we cover everything, Joost?
Maybe we can talk about what is the user experience when using Autopilot. What are the steps he's going to take from opening the device, clicking it into a network? That's our two different steps, because we've got Wi-Fi. When you connect it to Wi-Fi, you have to do some more steps. You've got, when you connect it to the LAN environment, it's smaller steps. Those are maybe a good topic to reach out as well.
White glove.
Yeah, that was one thing that we missed. I mentioned that in the beginning of the recording.
Yeah.
An IT department. We have set up Autopilot. We can hand over a device to a colleague or an end user, for example. But up front, I want to install some applications that needs to be downloaded, and that takes time, and the installation takes time, and that sort. Do we have options for that?
Yeah, so definitely via pre-provisioning or by using OSD. But if we just purely look at Autopilot, then you can pre-provision a device. And I think
and pre-provision, that was in the past. You called it white glove. That was the name that Microsoft had on that specific feature.
Exactly. Yeah. So what you basically need to do, you need to enable this on your Autopilot, on your profile, deployment profile, and then while booting, while being in the out-of-the-box experience, you need to press 7 times the Windows key, and then it will kick into the pre-provisioning process, and it installs all your applications
that are targeted
to
the device. Yeah.
Device, not the user targeted applications.
You can make a connection with the user eventually using the machine, and then that will be configured as well.
You can assign the user. That's back on, right?
Yeah, you need an app for that. You need to scan a barcode. But in most cases, the pre-provisioning is being used in a scenario where we want to have the machine config already on the machine, and then you actually reseal it, and then the user only has to do the user part of the ESP configuration.
Yeah, is this probably one of the reasons that self-deploying mode or what the other things are in preview? Or doesn't have it anything to do with each other?
No, I think that's a completely different scenario.
Yeah, I think so as well.
No.
Yeah.
But on that way, we can install upfront software on that.
Take example the Microsoft 365 apps. That's only almost 1 gig of download. Yeah.
Still.
Yeah, still. So eventually maybe 800 MB. I don't know, but it can take some time. And why not pre-configure that on the device and make sure that it's already installed on the device before handing it over to the end user? That's for me, that's a good option. But again, it's actually something that the IT department does for the user before the user actually logs on to the device. So it requires attendance. So it must be done in the location of where the IT department is. So, and it's actually another step compared to the full Autopilot process, where we can actually send off a new device towards the end user who can do the A to C configuration of the device itself.
Yeah, and then we have pre-provisioned some applications, and then we hand over that device to the end user, Joost.
Yep.
And then the user gets the same experience if they are buying a new laptop at some local market, for example.
Yeah, we're going to get into Ubi, so out-of-the-box experience. Connected to some internet. Next step are regional settings, keyboard, that kind of stuff. depends on if you are on Wi-Fi or on the LAN. Next step is he's going to connect to the Microsoft environment, saying it's being belong to a company, and you're going to get the nice customization of your company as well. And it's going to say, welcome to company X. Fill in your email address, and the next step is your password.
And when the user has done that,
It's going to the enrollment status page.
Hopefully MFA first.
Yeah, maybe.
Probably first. Yeah.
Yeah.
and then the enrollment status page, and then it will kick in the last pieces that is needed to configure that device. So the config policies will be applied. There will be applications installed as well. When that's done, then you have your machine up and running. Yes?
Yes. You're going to get kicked into the desktop environment.
And then you can do your normal day job, probably.
After setting some other policies, but that's for another session.
Yeah, we can do a lot of stuff like pre-provision and pre-configure OneDrive, Outlook, and all basic applications, but all securing that workplace as well.
Yeah, but if you look at what we see in the field, is that actually making the Autopilot process reliable is actually the biggest challenge. Yeah? So keep the applications that you want to have installed to a bare minimum. That's an important tip. And make sure that if you have a consistent experience every time. Meaning that if you shouldn't have a scenario where user A gets installed 10 applications and user B 2, because you will have a different experience from the Autopilot perspective. And what's really frustrating with Autopilot, especially with the enrollment status page, and I can say that I have like a love-hate relationship with it, is that if something fails, you have to wait for the timeout to actually figure out what failed and what happened. And coming from the config manager world, where we had all the logging available, even more maybe than we wanted, but we could easily identify that can be challenging when we are looking at troubleshooting Autopilot enrollment, because you have to look in the event log, the Intune management extension log, all kinds of other stuff. And you really have to educate yourself to become knowledgeable on where to find what information in order to do proper troubleshooting on that part.
Yeah, and it's good to have that timeout option if you are piloting or testing with Autopilot, to set that on a few minutes, because otherwise you have to wait for an hour or 1.5 hour.
Indeed, yeah. So I don't know what the default setting is. Is that
60 minutes.
60 minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
So
if it's failing, you have to wait 60 minutes.
Yeah,
But you can also enable bypass, so that you're not waiting until all the applications are installed.
Yeah, but that bypass will appear not directly. I guess that is appearing
After the timeout.
Yeah, it does. That's what I mean.
Okay.
And then,
but again, also the enrollment status page. To give you an example, you can also do an enrollment without.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is, of course, that the enrollment status page is displaying for the user everything that's necessary in order for the device to be considered okay for the company.
Yeah, but what we had in the previous, when we have no enrollment status page, there on the background, it was installing applications, and then where's my application? And then half an hour later or an hour later, that application appears.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons that the enrollment status page came in.
Indeed. But again, it should work for the user, and if it works against it, there are also options to turn the enrollment status page out in some scenarios.
Yeah.
And that's something that we do, for example, when we do a Windows 365 PC enrollment, we just turn it off because it usually already in the image, we have the necessary applications already available.
Yeah.
And users can actually start working directly on that device in that case. So again, also here, it's not mandatory to have the enrollment status page configured. Maybe in some cases we do the white glove or the pre-provisioning. We have all kinds of options, and depending on the scenario, we choose the right options for our customers.
So let's finish this one up. We have Autopilot configured. We have the hardware hashes available. We can enroll, so the user can have a unique experience to enable its device and use it. But then, from a management perspective, we need to apply a few policies, configuration, compliance, and all that sort of things. So we will cover that in the next recording.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening this time, and hopefully we will see each other next time, and then we will do something like basic policies. So thanks.
Alrighty, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Cool.